this in, you'll do a +1. Okay, so let me first fix all the indentation.
I have a dumb question.
Go ahead.
So the question was, there's two invocations returning the same end. Is that going to happen here?
There's only one invocation.
Right.
Or you want to have an example where the two invocations will return something different?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. We can change that. And let's do it all over again. I'm sorry, guys.
That's my fault. I wasn't clear on the question.
Okay, that's all right. Okay, we'll keep a good portion of that, so you probably just have to change a little bit of what you have typed in so far. So we'll say if n equals to 0, then we return x gets x plus 1, return x, else x gets x plus 2. And then in this case, we'll return the summation of the two. So we'll have invoke S5, n minus 1, specify n, x specifies x, and we can do a multiplication this time. Invoke S5, n minus 1 specifies n, x specifies x, like that. And if n defines sub, k gets a value of 1, invoke S5, and we can specify, let's see, 2 specifies n, and k specifies x, like that. Okay. So this time we do have two invocations on the same line, which is the same line as the return statement. Are there any questions about the code itself? Any questions? Okay. So let's go ahead and trace this one. This one is so close to the homework assignment. You know, this is really this should be really helpful in terms of doing the homework assignment because it's so close to it. Okay. I'll just call this S5, because the computation doesn't do anything specifically useful, so there's no particular reason to name it in a certain way. And I have to move the source code all the way down here because I need more space for the trace. So here we have the trace window, and I push it like this. All right, so we have comments, we have line number, which starts with pre, and there is one global variable in this case. K is a global variable. And as a global variable, unless I say something, it starts with an unknown value. The first line to execute is line 12, which is the first line outside of the definition of a subroutine. And all that does is to initialize k to 1. So column C gets a value of 1. Just trying to shrink the columns. Then we move on to line 13. And on line 13, I forgot to do a print here. Just insert a print if you have copied everything. Because otherwise we get a value back, but we don't do anything with that value. It just kind of evaporates. So on line 13, we have to invoke S5 first. Whatever it returns, I will print it out. We have to set up the return info column. We have to also set up two parameters, which in the first one is n, and the second one is x. In the return info cell, we specify we have to come back to line 13. By the time we get back to line 13, we will still have the print to perform, and it will just go ahead and print whatever the subroutine returns. Are we doing okay so far? Okay. Parameter n is just 2, is a constant. In this case, it's pretty easy. And x is passed by reference. It is a reference to k, and variable k lives in column C. As a result, x is an alias of column C. Okay. Are we doing okay so far with this? Yep.
Line 3, it should be by ref on the pseudocode.
In the pseudocode, yes, it should be by ref. Sorry. Okay. So now we move into the subroutine. We set up all the columns. We can now.
Why is there a question mark on line 5? Because
On line 5.
yeah.
On row.
column
Okay.
B.
This one
We
here.
haven't done the invocation yet. We
I
don't have
am
a question.
invoking because of that. The first time I execute line 13, I cannot do any print just yet. I have to invoke S5 first, find out what it is returning, then I know what to print. And that's why I have to invoke S5.
Right, but I actually wrote out invoke S5 because we haven't actually done it yet. We don't.
But we are doing it. It's not done, but we are doing it. We are invoking S5, and the invocation we are invoking that we are dealing with is the one that gets replaced by the question mark.
Oh, okay.
The question mark is a placeholder for the return value of that invocation.
Okay.
Okay. So now we go to line 4. Line 4 is the first line that has any action in the subroutine. All it does is to check whether n equals to 0. And that obviously is not true. So n equals to 0 is false. As a result, we skip the then portion. We go to the else branch starting on line 8. Line 8 doesn't do a whole lot. All it does is to increment x by 2. X is an alias of column C. Column C currently has a value of 1, and therefore it becomes 3. Sorry?
I got confused with the top.
With the top.
Go ahead, keep going.
Okay. On line 9, we have to return a value. But I'm not ready to return any values just yet because I have to compute the product of the return value of 2 invocations to S5. So in this case, I have to set up, the return info again. And every time I invoke S5, I also have to specify 1 column for n and 1 column for x. The return info is going to be, okay, so the first thing you want to do is to look at line 9 and decide, do I want to deal with the left-hand side first, or do I want to deal with the right-hand side first? Left-hand side first, because we read from left to right. Okay. So that means the return info column, or the return info cell, will spell out line 9, except the invocation that we're dealing with is replaced by a single question mark. The multiplication is still here because we cannot do it yet, and then the invocation on the right-hand side is just copied because that is not the invocation I'm dealing with this time. I will deal with that next time. Is that okay? Now this is going to look kind of ugly, so what I'll do is I will specify to wrap this particular column so it doesn't take up too much space. I think that's alignment. Vertically stacked, nope, wrap text automatically. There we go. So it looks kind of ugly, but this is the only way for me to keep it visible.
Okay, Tad, you have 2 invocations open now. So
Yes.
we're working on 2 invocations at the same time?
Yes, the first invocation got quote-unquote suspended because, in order to continue with step 9 or line 9, it has to perform the second invocation first. It has to find out what invoke S5 is going to return this time. Then it can continue.
So we're not actually doing 2 invocations at the same time. We're doing one and stop the other.
Yeah, basically we paused one invocation in order to finish the second invocation.
Okay.
And what I use to specify n is n minus 1. n minus 1 on the left-hand side specifies the n of column E, which has a value of 2. 2 minus 1 is 1, so the n of column H now has a value of 1. I use my x, which is column F, which is an alias of column C, to specify the new parameter x, which is column I. When we pass a pass by reference parameter by reference again, we're just passing the alias along. Okay, so we don't want to specify an alias of an alias. That's why in this case, x is just an alias of column C itself. Okay, any questions at this point? Nope. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll just do this part here. I will keep k, visible because we have to change k all the time. But now I'm all set up with column G, H, and I, which means I can continue with the subroutine itself. Every time you invoke a subroutine, you start from the first line that has any action. In this case, it is line 4. N equals to 0 is false again. We go to line 8. Line 8 is adding 2 to x. X is an alias of column C. Column C has a value of 3 right now. It gets incremented to 5. Then we go to line 9 again, and the same ugly thing happens. Okay, we have to allocate 3 columns exactly the same way. Except this time n has a value of 0 instead of 1 because, because the n of the left-hand side of the right arrow refers to column H, which has a value of 1. 1 minus 1 is 0. Okay, are we doing okay so far? And once we set up column J, K, and L, we can continue with executing in the subroutine from the beginning, which is starting on line 4. Line 4 once again checks whether n equals to 0, and this time it does equal to 0. As a result, we continue with line 5 instead of line 8. Line 5 adds 1 to x. X is an alias of column C. Column C has a value of 5. Adding 1 to it means it now becomes 6. Are we doing okay? Sort of? Yeah. Okay. After line 5, we go to line 6. Line 6 doesn't do a whole lot. All it does is to retrieve the value of x and return it. X is an alias of column C. Column C has a value of 6. In other words, line 6 is just returning the value of 6. Whenever you return a value, what you do is you find the rightmost return info cell, copy and paste it, and then change the question mark to whatever value that you're returning. Is that okay?
Now when we do it again, are we going to come up with 6 again?
Nope, it won't come up with 6 again, guaranteed.
Okay.
Well, you asked for an example where it won't return the same value,
Yes.
so I will give you an example.
That's exactly what I'm looking for.
Okay. So after line 6, which is the end of the then branch, we terminate the entire conditional statement. So we go all the way out to line 11. Line 11 is the end of the entire subroutine. So all we have to do is to clear out all 3 columns. We deallocate all 3 columns. So J, K, and L are now gone. Where do we go now to continue execution?
To G, H, and I.
We go back to line 9, okay? Because according to the return info, we have to go back to line 9. So that's why we're going to continue execution on line 9. Is that okay? That's the whole purpose of the return info line or column, is to tell me where am I supposed to go back to, and when I do get back there, what else do I have to do on that line? That's the whole purpose of the return info cell, which replaced return line number because we are going back to the same